Welcome to your call to adventure and my own hero's journey on my path of spiritual awakening. In this video, I will try to unpackage the convoluted events and revelations leading to my awakening October 13th, 2024. A matrix of understanding that incorporated my own life experience and learning with world events and epiphanies. This is going to be a doozy. I said at the launch of this channel that I was not sure what shape it would take, and I've come to recognize that what I'm doing is mostly for myself, and I shouldn't tie any expectations to it. This is an opportunity for me to learn twice by teaching, and a record of my experiences and realizations as I learn to love and trust my authentic self. Anything else that comes out of it is just icing on the cake. Right now, I also only plan to edit the beginning and endings of videos, so there aren't any breaks in the process of my commitment to authenticity. So, here we go. My awakening started probably in 2015, if I'm going to be honest. And while I had a lot of animosity towards Donald Trump at that time because of acquaintances and loved ones that were directly objects of vilification by him during his campaign. That was a big part of it. But it became clear as I started to look into it that there were some even bigger concerns. And knowing that came from some of my teachings, not my teachings, but the things that I learned when I was a staff member for the Church of Scientology. And it has to do with what constitutes reality. According to the Church of Scientology, reality is simply an agreement. And that resonates with me. Basically, if you look around today, the people that are most likely going to get put into a mental institution are those that disagree the most with the majority. So I can see where that could be reality. It also fits into my analogy of having our individual personal truths and creative sandboxes. You know, you can have your own personal truth, you can create within your own sandbox, but it's going to take an agreement to have that be a part of the greater majority. But what I saw happening was that Donald Trump was lying a lot. Every lie that you tell starts to warp the fabric of reality, because that untruth out there are decisions that are made based on that truth. Not that truth, sorry, statement. If the lie's out there, then and people act on that in good faith, but it's not true, then the outcome is not true. And the more lies that there are, the worse it's going to get. And I saw that at the very beginning, because I saw how he would tell people what to think. Another thing that I learned in the Church of Scientology was about suppressive persons. And that's basically people that, well, they stir up shit, basically. And they do this by, telling people, they speak in generalities. Everyone says this, everyone thinks that. They say, always these vague references to people. Never any specificity, so there can't be any accountability, when you bring it up to them. So where's I going with this? the alarm bells were going off really hard because I could see where basically reality was going to be destroyed by this guy. And the next thing I was wondering, okay, well, how did we get here? And, what have I missed while I've been on autopilot like everybody else, being apolitical about everything? So I started to try to feel this out, and I even tried to empathize with some of the people that he was eventually elected. So the people that had voted for him and were gloating at the people that didn't want him to be elected, and when trying to have any kind of civil discourse with them, it there was no productivity to it at all. It always came down to ad hominem attacks. You're a cuck. You're a snowflake. Facts don't care about your feelings. Fuck your feelings. Whatever. Very toxic. And it's actually what drove me away from Facebook. I didn't have didn't have hip boots tall enough anymore. But I watched, and I hoped that when he was elected, that things would calm down after he took office. And I had a glimmer of hope when he gave his acceptance speech, because it was a unifying speech, but it was probably written by somebody else. And I saw things that were just screaming that things were going to go to hell in a handbasket very shortly after that, over something as stupid as crowd sizes, and the tenacity of pursuing what was clearly not true, and then the propagation of that lie on the news when Kellyanne Conway goes on and starts talking about alternative facts. And then we start seeing reports out of Estonia about people making money off of fake news, and then fake news became part of Donald Trump's vernacular. So, I'm watching this, and was kind of suffering through it until 2020. And then, of course, Biden was elected. And I'll say right now that I don't agree with either party. I think that they're all establishment, and they're for whoever is willing to pay the highest price for them with the legalized corruption that's in place right now. But it was better than Donald Trump in my eyes, less destructive, especially after we saw what happened on January 6th. And it was kind of at that point that I tried to take a breather, rest a little bit, tried to enjoy my life, while I started to see that, Donald Trump was still interested in pursuing re-election. And I hope that he wouldn't, but oh man, this is so hard to unpack. It's so complex. If you dig into Donald Trump's past, there are some notable things that happened leading up to this. One of them that I think was noteworthy was that there was a White House Correspondents' Dinner in 2011, where basically Barack Obama more or less insulted him for his truther movement and disputing whether he was truly an American, was born in America, had a birth certificate, whatnot. And also Seth Meyers was pretty much insulting him as well. And when you looked and saw Donald Trump's face as they were saying all these things, he looked very looked like he was plotting. It was strange. And then I looked at his philosophy on revenge. I think it was in The Art of the Deal, and how gleeful he was about taking out revenge on people that he felt wronged him, whether it was his own employees. We saw immediately that he retaliated against Barack Obama by trying to dismantle or take credit for everything that Barack Obama did, including hoping to get rid of and repealing Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, among other things. But that's part of the philosophy. And then his family, their church was the one where the clergy was Norman Vincent Peale, who is famous for the power of positive thinking. And Trump's mentor was an attorney named Roy Cohn, and he was self-proclaimed as ridiculously patriotic, and he prosecuted people that were accused of being communists during the Red Scare and the McCarthy hearings. And he taught Donald Trump the three rules for success, basically. And the rule one was attack, attack, attack. So never to be on the back foot, on defense. To admit nothing and to deny everything. And then finally, to claim victory and never admit defeat, which we saw demonstrated at the close of the 2020 election when he proclaimed victory before the mail-in votes had been counted. So anyway, I guess that kind of puts us, I think that brings us up to just throughout his press conferences, his media interactions, his rallies, he would continue with this distortion of reality. He would deny things that were clearly even on video of things that he said or things that he promised. He would deny, true to Roy Cohn's tutelage of him, I guess you might say. And another trick that he used was repetition. The more he repeated things, I'm not 100% sure if there is some kind of rule about this, but it seems like if you repeat something 3 times or more, it's much more likely to stick. Like 3 seems to be some kind of magical iteration. I don't know. But we started to see this feedback loop. He would say things, and then we have the media that would claim to be reporting both sides, even when one side or the other was clearly lying about things. So then the lie would be repeated, and then Donald Trump would repeat what the media said and use that as a source, and so and on it went. And so the rolling destruction of reality continued and continued. If you want to get a good idea on a microcosm level, watch Stephen King's Needful Things. I had seen it before. I watched it again. It's free on YouTube, but basically chaos ensues because of all of the lies being told and the accusations and false attributions of actions on that of certain people when it was someone else completely unrelated that was doing some of these things. I think it applies a lot. And I also think that it kind of points to Stephen King might be more awakened than we might think. And if you don't believe that, after this video, you can go back and watch the original The Stand movie. You might see it differently. So, as we started to wrap up the campaigning for the 2024 election, I started to notice that, well, okay, so there were some videos on YouTube that say something like woke kid against 20 Trumpers, or woke kid, against Trump, or convincing Trump supporters, or questioning. And what I noticed was that the pattern would be that the woke kid, so to speak, would ask them what it would take to convince them to vote against Donald Trump. And they would say, well, if he did this, then whatever. And then they would bring up evidence of him having done that thing. And they would push the goalpost further out. Oh, well, but, and I've even seen this in my own family, where you try to fact check them, and ultimately, if it disproved what they were claiming, then they would just say, well, it's stupid anyway, or something dumb like that. So then we have a situation where there's this perpetual condition of cognitive dissonance that's out there, where people are able to hold two completely opposite and opposing thoughts as being true at the same time. And that is a mental health accident waiting to happen. A lot of this was because of galvanized, rigid belief. The immovability, or the unwillingness or humility to admit that another thing might be possible, or that a belief that they have might be faulty. So I'm watching this, and all throughout, I have a very puzzle-oriented mind. I spent a lot of time in software support. I did a lot of puzzles when I was a child. I've just always kind of had a knack for recognizing patterns in things, and reducing factors within a problem to try to figure out the solutions. But I was just desperately trying to figure out how we could fix this, how we could resolve it, where things were going. And in the course of that, I came across a couple of videos that are on YouTube. I think one of them is free and the other one might need to pay for it or rent it. But one of them is called hashtag unfit, and the other one is hashtag untruth. In hashtag unfit, they had psychologists on there, psychiatrists. They were talking about, they were wondering whether there was actually an evolutionary unconscious, what's the word I'm looking for? instinct within humanity, that we all perceive that everything that we're doing is calculated and planned, where it could be possible that we're actually being driven in the same way that birds fly south for the winter. And one of those doctors was talking about the behavior of primates after one of their groups reaches a certain size. It'll split, and then they start to basically war against each other. I thought that was interesting. And then in hashtag Untruth, another psychologist, Sheldon Solomon, was talking about something called death anxiety, which is basically simplified. It's the idea of we recognize that one day we're going to die. And so we try to create purpose for ourselves here. So that could mean through religion. It could mean through, organizations, very heavily through religion. And so that could be a drive behind some of the things, the reasons that people will believe the things that they do, even when they don't make sense, and why they will attribute their power and their actions to an unprovable God or being or someone outside of themselves. Well, man. So I started to formulate this idea in my head that when we're talking about this cognitive dissonance that this large group of people was holding in their head all the time, it made me think of quantum computers, because a quantum computer is in opposition to a binary computer. A binary computer operates basically off of on or off electric impulses, whereas the quantum computer is able to have a range of possibilities. It's fluid as far as being able to hold space for not just the extreme ends of possibilities, but everything in between. And I started to try to think about, were we in some sort of evolutionary, were we on the brink of a new evolution? So about this time, another thing that came into my mind was that you always heard all of these ridicule against people that would say conspiracy theories, would make claims about, especially like QAnon, making claims about the elites killing and eating children, or taking adrenochrome, whatever. And I got to thinking about conspiracies. Basically, a conspiracy is only a conspiracy until you find out that it's true. And unfortunately, we have found that there were some things that had been deemed conspiracies that have long since been found out to have been true. Like experimentation of is it sickle cell anemia or is it syphilis? I can't remember. On black people, or we had the Project Blue Book, we had the MK Ultra program. All those turned out to be things that were actually happened. So we can't really say whether some of the things that are being claimed as being conspiracy theories are true or not. that made me start to wonder if some of these claims were true, and to go through a thought exercise of, well, what would happen if they were true? What would drive someone to those lengths of depravity? Man, I hope this is coming through right. So, another thing that I learned in the church is, I'm sorry, hold up. No, let me back up a second. While I was looking from that angle, trying to get some clarity, I ran across a channel called Morgue Official. And it was basically as a channel that talked about Gnosticism, the Illuminati. I forgot that was also something that I had read about a little bit. And gave a theory about reality, and how what we see around us is not really around us, but is actually, well, it is, but it's generated from our own consciousness. And that by using something called ontological math and frequencies, there was a theory, or an idea that made sense about, as far as bringing from the non-physical consciousness into manifesting this more solid space-time reality around us. And the way that it basically went was that the equation was everything always equal zero. So, like, 1 minus 1 equals 0, 2 minus 2 equals 0, 3 minus 3 equals 0, blah, blah, blah. But the whole idea was that all of those equations through infinity were inclusive of all the possible frequencies that caused the waves that eventually became the particles that created our reality. I'm not doing it justice and trying to explain it, but it made sense to me, because it doesn't make sense that there's, we're here. I mean, we came from somewhere. I mean, evolution does make sense, but yeah, where was I going with that? This is convoluted. Okay. Well, okay, so I don't believe necessarily in a sky god, or, a fire and brimstone, hell, damnation, petty god. I kind of look at our existence as being from a source, and where people assume that the assumption is always, when proving whether or not God exists, the assumption always is, well, how can something come from nothing? Well, it can't. But what if the natural state of being was never nothing? It was always something. That's the only way that it made sense to me. And this kind of resonated with that same idea. If you want to look into that further, you can check the Morgue Official YouTube page. He goes over a whole bunch of stuff. I don't necessarily believe all of it, but as I said before, I think there's truth in everything. So, the thought exercise that I did, I started to think about people like Jeffrey Epstein, or if there were elites that were doing some of these horrendous things, what would their mentality be like? Have they reached a point of possession and power so great that they feel like they're superior to everyone else below them, to where they make their own rituals, basically become their own god, and they separate themselves by this proclamation, this self-realization. They separate themselves from the rest of humanity. They segment themselves. So now this is where, based on what I discussed about, so I discussed source, but the idea of there being source and also of our thoughts manifesting the reality around us. That is not just one person doing that. That's everyone. So therefore, we are all connected back to that same source. If someone has the mentality that they're greater than everyone else and they're doing things to harm them, they're harming themselves. And the more harms that they cause against mankind, those that they are connected to, they should eventually return to unity. They are impairing themselves. The more heinous acts that are committed, the more dark, I guess you might say, their soul becomes, their mind. I still haven't completely decided whether soul and mind are separable or not, but this also goes back to another person that you can find on YouTube. His name is Jonathan Adam Pants, and he was an oncologist. I listened to some of his stuff back in around 2012. And of course, he would use metaphors for cancer, talking about how people that were outliving or that were consuming more resources than they should be, that were living beyond the extent that they were supposed to within a system. These were cancer metaphors. And that kind of made me think of that when applied to the idea of someone becoming so so arrogant, so full of themselves, I guess, that they actually became their own god. That they were like a cancer within the system of mankind. And in the closing campaigns and rallies for the 2024 election, it almost seemed like Donald Trump was just kind of trying to bait the people. One thing was, I noticed the rallies were getting smaller, so I thought, well, okay, maybe people are done with this garbage, and they're not believing the lies anymore, which didn't turn out to be true. But so there was that, and then it made me think of the people that were binary in their thinking, and they could not resist the vacuum in their mind of not knowing something. It takes a lot of mental strength and fortitude to not fill a gap of uncertainty with something that we just assert as a truth, a belief. And that extreme had happened as far as Trump's followers. It got to a certain point where that belief was so so rigid that they could not flex out of it anymore for any other possibilities. Well, what happened from there? So, in the final days before I had my awakening, it became extremely clear to me that if a malignant narcissist could climb to the highest position of power, basically within the free world, that would mean that there are other mentally impaired people that have crawled to those high positions in other systems, whether it's financial, whether it's religious, or educational, any of that stuff, which was very depressing to think about. But with Donald Trump out there in the open, it gave us a model. Like it put right in our faces a model of what this would look like, so that those people in those other positions could be identified and replaced. So then I started to think about the way things have been developing. We've got this war over in Israel, and we've got the political party there that's trying to get us embroiled in a war with the Middle East, which conveniently is right in line with the a lot of the predictions in the Bible, the prophecies. Then we also have a completely unreliable media, so you can't really rely on anything from that perspective. And then we've got AI, so we've got deep fakes, and we've got falsifications that are possible. And it made me realize that it's going to become incumbent on all of us to be able to have faith that there are good people within humanity, because we have to be able to discern face to face, or on video, wherever. We've got to be able to determine that this person is being honest, that they're being authentic. That's pretty tough to do, especially when you have all these challenges. And having to go back again to the idea of the source. The other thing that I forgot to mention was that while we're considered to be living within space-time, the realm of thought and any level above that connecting back to source is not subject to the laws of space and time. So because of the way things were shaping up around the world, because of my trust in myself, that the ideas around the Abrahamic religions were distorted or wrong altogether, it still made me wonder, well, why is all this happening? That seems to be exactly what's prophesied. Why do we have Christians and Jews that are claiming that these are the end times and this is exactly like they said it was going to happen? And it made me think that there is an effort that's outside space and time that was able to manipulate things to be able to control and subdue us as the human race. I don't know why they wanted to do that, or I didn't know at the time. I have some ideas now. But what that ultimately led me to conclude was that, based on how dire the circumstances have gotten so far, that we were on the brink of a mental or mind evolution. We believe that we come through evolution, even if we might have a divine spark within us, but that also includes the mental capacities, our minds. You look at your dog or your cat, they're sentient beings, but they're not aware that they're aware. Whereas we're sentient, and we're aware that we are aware and interactive with the world around us. And that got me to thinking, okay, so if we're evolving within our minds again, what would be the next step? Well, the next step to me would be that we need to evolve to where we are connected to one another as the human race, that we find that unity, and all of these circumstances are lining up to make it basically to where we don't really have a choice in the matter. There are deceptive tools, there are corrupt systems, all of these factors that make it necessary for us to not so much have faith in a God as to have faith in each other. And if you think about that idea, and then you go back to Jesus Christ as a teacher, he said very clearly that inasmuch as ye have done it to the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. So it's not like it doesn't make sense. He talked about how if we didn't become even as little children, we would not be able to enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, a child, unfortunately, as they're being raised, gets indoctrinated and conditioned by society, by their parents, by the influences around them. But before that, they have wonder. They are trying to learn about things. They don't claim to, believe beyond all doubt, certain things like us adults have come to believe. There's even a part in there that I thought was interesting, where it's talking about the parable of the enemy that sowed tares among the wheat field. And the master of the field said to let them grow for a season together, and then we would harvest the wheat and burn the tares. I don't necessarily equate that to death. I can't claim to know how things are going to go, but I think that could fit very well with what I'm talking about as far as evolution. There's those that they're basically sick. Their mind is not working correctly. And then there's others that have recognized, wait a minute, I've had all my attention freaking out, fearful, wondering, when the sky's going to fall, getting sucked in by the fear mongering of the media and the various systems around us that want to keep us fearful. And I tell you, when it turned out that on November 6th, Donald Trump had won the election, I mean, I had been through it before, and this time I'm like, no, this is ridiculous. So I found peace with it, and I turned my attention to my own development and to having faith in my brothers and sisters, and to recognizing and being able to love everyone. I think that we're all basically good, and through circumstances that shaped us, as well as, unfortunately, choices that we decide to make that choose our paths and choose the extent to which we become cancerous or are further from the light or love, that are further towards fear and less towards love. But if we have empathy, then we can find ways to love even people like Donald Trump, because we can have empathy for the experiences that shaped him. Now, I have no doubt that there were some choices that he made that were self-serving and likely destructive and pushed him further towards fear, but we all started out the same. So the grand conclusion that I've come to, after fretting over what was going to happen, with war, what was going to happen with politics, what was going to happen with all these systems around me, that just the only way that I was going to be able to make a change was to be that change and to have love. And this was interesting because not long after that, and also keeping in mind one more factor to add to this, the disclosures that we started to have in 2017 about UAPs being real. I was watching an episode with I think it was the first interview that was done with Lou Elizondo on the Kurt Jai-Mongol Theory of Everything channel on YouTube. And I decided I was going to do a test, because at that point I felt like I had awakened. Things were going crazy for me. I was applying this new paradigm of thinking that had just hit me like a ton of bricks to different events in my past, recognized where I had questions, just blinks of questions in the past, that if I had pursued them would have been an inspired way would have put me on an inspired path, or given me some knowledge that I didn't have before. But looking in retrospect, I picked that knowledge up. But I applied all of these ideas, especially the ideas about the quantum computer mind, the evolution, the separation of those that were further in fear than those towards love. And it fit perfectly. I was able to watch that, and it made sense when I applied that paradigm to it. So now I think, I'm focusing on trying to be the change that I want to see, trying to stay in positive love vibrations, I guess you might say. Um, I think that we will be meeting extraterrestrials very soon. I think that the people that have awakened and are trying to be that change they want to see are, I think that the more that they, using the terms of the spiritual community, they vibrate at that higher level, closer to 5D than to the 3D that we're in right now. Things get accelerated. So if the momentum continues the way that it has been, I think that we very likely could meet extraterrestrials, or no, I think we'll meet extraterrestrials in 2025. I thought for a while that it could be possible that it could be an ancient AI of some sort, which there might be some of that, but yeah, I think we've got some exciting times ahead of us. And the messages that I've gotten so far is that all of this darkness, these systems that artificially connect us and are based upon self-interest rather than the highest good, that they are going to crumble, that there will be some suffering. There has been some suffering, but not to be fearful. And at this point, it just doesn't make sense to approach it any other way. There's no change that's being made through the normal political process, financial process, educational process. They've all become very destructive, and they're not sustainable. So I choose love, and I hope that I am able to, through my authenticity, through my caring for mankind, and my desire to fulfill what's going to be the highest good for my species, for all of those that I am connected to. I hope that who I am can inspire those around me to choose love as well. So anyway, that was super long. I'm sorry about that. I hope it made sense. If you have any questions, right now I have the latitude to be able to address them, so feel free to leave them for me. I'm very happy to interact with any of you. Thanks for those of you watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you get a wild hair up your ass. My goal is to start posting more frequently to piss off my fear and anxiety through repeated exposure. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I hope you have a great rest of your day.